All right, welcome everybody to New Geometry, and I'm excited today to do this new conversation with Gail and Gregory Hoag. I'm George Leoniak, and um, I recently discovered that Gail and Gregory, who are long-time sacred geometers, and specifically working with making tools and pendants and beautiful sacred geometry, they recently wrote a book called Sacred Geometry, the Universal Language of Divine Alignment. And I was super thrilled to get a hold of this and read through it. And today we're going to not specifically talk about everything in the content of the book. We're going to kind of go on some meandering paths around sacred geometry and the things that we love here. But I want to first welcome you both to this conversation and just give you a moment to open it up and greet our viewers and anything else you'd like to add. Gail or Gregory, thanks for being here.
Thank you, George, for having us. I'm looking forward to talking about geometry and how it relates to consciousness today.
And we've been doing this for close to 40 years together. And honestly, when we started back in the mid 80s, people didn't get it. So it's wonderful now that there's a whole new interest level and people are understanding the significance of sacred geometry.
Right, right. I mean, it's great to talk to you for having such a long-term relationship to sacred geometry and really seeing how the field has changed and grown. Is there anything that you have noticed over that 40-year time span? What were some of the pivotal moments, during that journey where things kind of ramped up to new levels when your work became even more and more relevant? Is there anything you have to add around that?
Well, I'll start out where back early on when we were first getting started, and honestly, we were getting things at a very intuitive level. And we made it our business to learn more. And we were very fortunate to have people who were some great masters of sacred geometry, like Keith Critchlow, John Michel, Robert Lawler, and having that opportunity to work with them and learn from them. And they all came to it from a spiritual context, which was on par with where we were coming to it as well. So it was a blending of how we really see this as our soul's journey. And their work was, I believe, for me, it was very pivotal. And then the other thing I think that was really significant and perhaps different than some people understand sacred geometry is that when Gregory first showed me some of the structures that he had created, my background is in the arts. And so I would, pick them up and feel it. And I would feel energy coming off of these different angles. And that was fascinating to start immediately looking at geometries from the perspective of how can that make a difference in our lives? What can it do for us to speed up our evolutionary path and heighten our ability to expand into higher consciousness?
Oh yeah, beautiful. Well, it sounds like it's been almost a lifelong journey of continuing to explore that, and beautiful that you both have had an opportunity to share that journey together. Now, Gregory, I have a question for you. When you first started working with the forms, from what it sounds like in the book, you really just kind of got more of an intuitive sense to kind of start to work with them. And how did it reveal itself kind of in your journey, to you working with the forms? Were you able to just visualize and see? I mean, I'll let you explain for how that process was, but I would love, I'm sure the viewers would be interested in how that kind of started to move with you and through you.
Well, I worked with different spiritual masters through the 70s and was in a number of ashrams. I was pursuing, spiritual understanding. And then with a friend, I built a pyramid in the late 70s. And in 1980, we were taking turns sleeping in this pyramid. And at that time, in today's dollars, it cost about 250,000 to build, around 200,000. So it was a lot of money went into it because of the large crystal balls and so forth. And it set off my Kundalini. And what that is, for people that may not be familiar with it, it's when energy starts moving back through the body. You see, we're spiritual beings connected to the higher realms. I'm reaching up because it almost is through the higher chakras we connect in to that aspect of our being. And Kundalini is rising from the physical, from the earth, from the mother, moving back through us in a way that it's clearing the channels. And it was very uncomfortable. As I shared in the book, I was burning holes in my hands and feet just from the energy. So what happened is I started tuning in, hearing a lot of higher information. Beings that don't exist in this dimension were communicating with me. And so I was being shown the way energy moves before it becomes physical. And I started building what I was seeing. And even now, if someone describes something, I see things visually inside my head. And so I built things and people started feeling energy. And in college, I studied the sciences. So every time I'd hand something to someone, I'd go, really? How about this one? I mean, it amazed me that these were broadcasters, receivers, broadcasters of energy, and that we hadn't really looked at sacred geometry that much from that perspective. And at that time, when I met Gail, she was working with channeling Buckminster Fuller. And so she understood some of his teachings, and I was ignorant of even what the Platonic solids were. I couldn't name them. I didn't know anything other than I was just building what I was seeing. And I was doing it in metal. And so luckily, I picked a medium that carried the energy. And so that's when she started bringing Bucky into the conversations. And we started growing our business in 1985.
That's super exciting. I really, what were some of, I mean, I know it sounded like you were working in building pyramids, but what were some of the first intuitive forms that you started constructing? Did you build any of the Platonic solids, not knowing what they were? Was some of that in the ether, let's say, kind of coming in? What were some of the first ones?
Well, Gail had a friend that she had, someone that she had studied some sacred geometry with. So she brought him in, and he became a lifelong friend. And his name is Bob Gulick. He passed a number of years ago. But bottom line, he started looking at some of the things I was building, and he says, oh, that is and so I was building some of the Platonic solids. I was building combinations of things. And I said, really? It has a name. I didn't know. I knew it as the energy. I knew it as just the shape that it was. But it was like someone coming along saying, oh, your kids have names. And
Yeah.
I went, really? Okay. And that it was fun as it started unfolding more and more. And we discovered that we had a means to help people raise their consciousness and make that connection to spirit more deeply within the center of their being. And so that became our journey and has been for the last almost 40 years now.
Hmm.
One of the first structures that I remember that you were carrying around was something that we called the 3D star, the three-dimensional Star of David. And it had all these tetrahedrons in it, and I think, what, 4 different 3D stars in there. And it turns out that that particular structure was amazing for meditation. So when it would hang above the crown, you could go into a meditation much more rapidly, more deeply. We actually at one point did some brain studies, and it showed that the right and left hemispheres of the brain were synchronizing more quickly. And so we were really fascinated at that point with learning more about what these structures were doing, not only spiritually, but physiologically.
Mhm.
And so they definitely were making a difference in our bodies. And that supported us and kind of motivated us to create more of these structures and understand why in the world is that so.
Hmm.
And so that George has really been our journey, is to understand that and to create tools that give people these connections that are absolutely normal and natural, but they're not what we tend to have in our everyday lives because of all the things that are going on in our lives and the many distractions and, you know, the things that everything from toxins to fears to EMFs to all kinds of things. We need something that can help support us to be on a path to evolve mind, body, and spirit. And we found that with sacred geometry, it was some of the most effective ways of doing that.
Well, thank you for your gifts of sharing this wonderful work with the world and bringing it into our hands, specifically with building those beautiful 3D models. I love working with the 3D models as well, and making a lot of paper, mostly paper. I don't know the welding or working with the the Zoom tools, which is a nice, easy way to work with them. But as a person who really draws a lot, the 2D and the transferring from the 2D to 3D, I love the part of your book towards the end where you talk about the pendant and how you have the 2D drawings and how you have the 3 orthographic projections but 2D alone, by just having one particular view, you're missing all this other information that the other views provide, and how you recognize that by putting into the pendant the 3 different views of particular form, you were somehow kind of gathering the information that that form had to offer from a 2D perspective, kind of bringing the 3D into the 2D. I don't know if I'm saying this well, but it was really fascinating, interesting to me, because just a lot of my viewers they know that I work in these 3 different orthographic perspectives to show the form from multiple views. So when you brought that up, I thought that was a beautiful crossover. I'm just curious how you made that connection, both of you, to look at the 2D and bring that in. Was there anything in your journey specific around that component?
Well, we work with some very, very high beings that are beyond the dimensional systems. And I remember back in, I think it was the early 2000s, I was working with a channel at that time who was channeling Hilarion. And I asked, is there a way to get the energy that happens in a 3-dimensional form from a 2-dimensional form? And his answer was kind of cryptic and said, oh, human beings have been working on that for a long time, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't give me an answer. And then I think it was our guidance as we were trying to work with some pendants and find a way that we could bring the energy in without having something like this size hanging around your neck makes it difficult to hug someone or eat or do anything. And so it's like, okay, there's got to be a way to do it. And somehow I got this, what was it, inspiration, download, whatever, where it became evident that if you take a three-dimensional form, just as you were explaining pretty well, George, if we were to get the plans for a house and we had the floor plans, that wouldn't allow us to build the house unless we had the elevations too. And so what we found is this is a well-known form. It's the Metatron's cube, but here it is three-dimensionally. So if you look at this from the face, you get this pattern, and you look at it from the edge, you get this pattern, and you look at it from the point, you get this pattern. And that's the one that's become very famously known as Metatron's cube, although it's really only one shadow of Metatron's cube. And we should probably explain what you said was orthogonal. And what that means is right angle. So if you have light moving through a form and then you project it on a flat surface, it's at a right angle to the direction of the light, and you get these different projections. And then what I discovered was to do those projections in metal on a non-conductive background, it's like we have all three different projections, and some there are four projections, but the three main ones from the point, the edge, and the face. And when those are projected in metal on a non-conductive background, and you surround it by a circle, circle is the original image for wholeness, for God, for soul. All the aspects begin within the circle. And then the three-dimensional aspect is the sphere. So the circle makes it a unity, and that way we have a two-dimensional geometry that can actually pick up on and be an antenna for three-dimensional geometry. So I'm going to show you the pendant that we are referring to here. And these are images from our book that I've just brought up. Here's the pendant we're talking about. And it has two sides, because one side, like the one on the image on the left, which is the star, when that's toward the body, then that geometry, it's moving the energy up. And we feel it more in our crown, in our mind, our focus that way. The other side is moving it toward the earth, and it's grounding. And you can see in the very center of the image on the right, there are three small images inside that football shape, which you know as a vesica piscis or vesica piscis, as it's come to be called. And there are three images inside that, and those are the three images of Metatron's cube. And then I have other geometries around it, other geometries inside. So what's fun is we can put a lot of three-dimensional geometries in these small pendants, and people pick up on that energy, and it concentrates it and really focuses it, so that that, along with about 30 some other antennas inside these pendants, because they have a thickness, and we found a way to create little antenna systems with titanium spirals and photovoltaic tubes and oscillating crystals and circuit boards. And so, and, you know, just always guided so that we are having the energy unfold as we're ready to work with it.
Oh, thanks for that super detailed answer. That's super interesting. I really appreciate that. And it's just amazing to see those little, I mean, because we draw those different forms, and those are miniature. To get those cut out of metal and put in there is just phenomenal to get that at that scale. So that's just beautiful, really amazing.
And you know, what I find really amazing too is that it was always our intention to be able to have something that people could have on their body that would support them in that connection. And so we had a number of different formulations of these pendants. And over the years, we've evolved them. What has always happened that's so amazing is that people would pick it up and they would feel it. Well, feeling is one thing that's really important. However, what I find is even more important than just feeling the energy is, what are you going to do with the energy now? And so when people are opening themselves up to these kinds of technologies, what it's doing is supporting their connection to their multidimensional self, to their soul, to, you know, spirit, whatever they, you know, wherever their consciousness takes them. And in a very beautiful way, lives change, relationships improve, things like intuition starts to really get much more active. And the flow of energy is really supporting them. And, you know, we are created, everything is energy, and we're created to be in that energetic flow. When the soul departs the body is dead. And that soul connection is always creating that contact for the higher energies and for the essential energies that we need to live, breathe, and move. And so these pendants have had such an enormous impact on people's lives that it's amazing. You know, things like serendipity starts to become a natural thing, which I think it is a natural thing. You know, what has happened that we don't realize is that we've blocked off so many of the opportunities that we have as a human being. So what this does is it brings it back into a way where you can really make use of it. And it's not as if it's taking you for a ride, but you instead are in the driver's seat. However, you've got a little bit better fuel to work with.
That's beautiful. It sounds like you've really brought the sacred back into the geometry. You know, it's about the journey and the connection, because it is easy. You know, I can attest to this for sure, to get wrapped up into the mathematics of it, the angles, the connections of, and it's a beautiful mystery, you know, unfolding over and over again, exploring all that kind of scientific terrain. But the way you're describing the deeper purpose of the meaningfulness of working with the geometry and how it's part of an evolutionary process for an individual to connect in this way, like I said, it really combines the sacredness back into the art of working with the geometry. The art and the science and the spirituality, I guess, all blended together is what I'm hearing from how you're kind of describing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And, you know, from, I think, my perspective, what makes geometry sacred is its ability to move that energy, to make a connection from source, from soul, into the physical incarnation. Because something, I have a slide, another slide, George, that might be fun, just to show the way we envision people, as we shared in our book, we're like icebergs, where 90% of us exists at a hidden level. That's where the astral level is where the emotions hang out. So our emotional body, we don't see it. Some people can see that aura and see the colors, and some people can tap into the future, but the majority of our subtle body is totally invisible. And so that's why we're like an iceberg, and yet like the energy moving from soul into the physical, that is also like the metaphor of a boat that is pumping oxygen to a deep sea diver. So the energy needs to come from source into us, as Gail was saying. When soul departs the body, then the body dies. And so what we're sharing right now is that has to be connected all the time for our health, for our well-being, for our ability to create. And yet all these different aspects of especially modern life that you're seeing on the right with the electromagnetic pollution, the stress, the negative emotions that come out of us, the judgments and the beliefs and the toxins, all of that blocks that flow of energy. And so what we're doing with sacred geometry is looking at what are the archetypes, what are the building blocks used by creation for forming this reality. And when we duplicate those in our reality, which is what happens with some of the geometries we build, then we start to feel a resonance with what's natural, with what's real. And that shifts the way we feel and the way we think and the way we act, and even the health of our body, because the energy is flowing. You see, difficulty and disease are all a reflection of where we've blocked that flow of energy. And sacred geometry, by moving energy, that's the definition I shared at the beginning of when I was talking right then. Sacred geometry moves energy from source into this dimension. And so that way we can not disconnect. And that's one of the biggest things I think that people are struggling with today, is that sense of separation, the sense of, not being able to connect with ourselves, with each other, with, nature. And when we are in nature, you can feel how all the aspects of what has been created appropriately, it feels so good. The trees and the wind through the trees and the sun shining on your face and that energy coming in, that's a geometry too from the sun, which was, I think, something new that we shared in our book that hasn't really been put out there before.
Well, it sounds very, the way you're describing it there sounds in the same way that it's very grounding and very etheric at the same time. It's both ends of the spectrum kind of all coming together. Some may look to have a tool like this to maybe have a deeper, heightened sense of experience, but at the same time, it's also helping you move through the different challenges that we face in life, like anxiety or stress and all those things, which all have to work together. So it's not an isolated, polarized way of viewing. It's very unified in how you're describing the tools working, rather than just a one-way target.
Exactly. And George, that when you go back in and you look at historically where sacred geometry has appeared, whether you want to look at the pyramids or you want to go back into ancient temples, there was knowledge that brought together the way of constructing the different dimensions, the way that the structures evolved was very specific. And it was all related to these rhythms and patterns and cycles of how energy moves from the formless into the form. And, I think it's important for people who are plagued by those feelings of separation that we're not living in some crazy random universe. When we look at sacred geometry, the thing that is so appealing to me is that you can count on it. It's very precise. It's something that is at the center of all evolution. And, when I go back and I look at things like, the carpets that were made in ancient times, they would call them magic carpets, and they would have very precise structure, very beautiful colors and structures that when people sat on them, supposedly they could take off to another dimension. When people would go into a cathedral that was constructed based on sacred geometric principles, they would enter into that divine womb first, what we call the Vesica Pisces, to prepare themselves to go into the chapel for a higher experience. So people have known for many, many years that there are ways that we can elevate our consciousness and elevate our lives. Because we're so inundated with all the modern technologies, it's not been as available or useful to people. So yeah, this is, I think, a very practical way for people to integrate all the different aspects of who they are and their journey of being a human being.
Well, I mean, as you were saying there, I mean, cross-culturally, sacred geometry has been used for all sorts of religious, spiritual purposes. It's a unifying pattern language like that. And it sounds like you're providing tools to help people create their own inner sanctuary, their own temple in their own body, and a temple in their space around them. And so I guess in a way it is, it's temple building, it's providing those geometries that the cathedral is us, the cathedral is in our space, we surround ourselves with these things, and it has a cumulative influence on our well-being.
Well said.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's, I mean, well, as I'm constructing my temple architecture with the things around me, it has that cumulative effect of working with the geometry. I think for me, I'm a practical, hands-on type of person. I love to build, construct, to draw. I mean, those continue to get us immersed into that sacred rhythm, the sacred pattern language. It must be very meditative for you to build and work and construct these forms just as much, and put all your energy and good vibes and good feelings into it, in the creation of these beautiful artworks. So that goes into it too, the consciousness of the maker of it. It's a huge piece, I imagine.
It is. And everything that we do is handmade. Like when you were looking at those pendants before, we start out with a sheet of metal, of stainless steel, that then there's a machine that we have that impresses into it the way to create that curve and the right shape, and bezeling the gems and doing all these things with precision and with consciousness. And that's really different for a lot of people, to have something that is created with that level of intention and love and awareness. And it does really make a difference. I know, for instance, like when I've been in front of some of the great paintings, you can feel the energy, you can recognize what it was that artist put into it. And those are really important aspects of what we do.
Right, right. I'm reading the book. Thank you for giving me more of that detailed experience of the personal journey. But even the landscape where you make the forms and the pendants, there was a whole intricate description of how the energy moves through the land and it transfers from one place to the other. And I was just fascinated by the landscape, how it was incorporated into the construction of everything. So, if you want to add anything to that, Gregory or Gail, just talking about kind of the macro surrounding how you're putting it into the micro.
Hmm. You know, it is important to consider the way the land is laid out. And so ancients started understanding this through Feng Shui is one of the important aspects of understanding how structure and how structure in relationship to land works. And when we were led by guidance to get this land, and we have a couple hundred acres. Most of it is in a conservation easement, so it won't be built on, but we walk on it and we have geometries on different vortexes and work with the energy. And what was fun was when spirit, our guidance, would reveal the importance of some of these aspects. For example, as we look to the west, there are two big mountains that are a double peak right next to each other. They form a cup. And I realized that, I mean, sometimes spirit, the way it works with us is it will knock a book off the shelf. It will have us bump into the right person at the right time. And for that understanding, just after we had purchased this land, we were on a trip in Crete. And there is an ancient temple at Heracleum where the whole legend of the Minotaur came about and the labyrinth. And the reason that came about was this was such an ancient civilization, but they were working with a lot of consciousness. They didn't have pictures of going off to war on the walls. They had people dancing with flowers in their hair. They had people swimming with dolphins. They had the bull. They did a ceremony where they would dance and do acrobatics over the bull. But the bull's horns were in the yard of many of the opening spaces of this building, and they were all shaped, kind of stylized, almost like a vase cut in half. And I realized that they were like a receptacle, and all of them were pointing toward these little mountains that were double-peaked mountains in, I think, the western part of this province. And so that's when I asked my guidance, is there a connection here? And they said, of course. And that's why they were sharing that with us, so that we would realize that those mountains, to the double peaked mountains, and then there's another double peak in between that and our property. And then on the back of our property is the highest mountain this far east on the plains. I mean, just before you hit the mountains, this mountain comes up, coming from the plains, and it's got a double peak, actually a triple peak, where it's focused toward that and then focused further south. And so it's catching and moving that energy. And that's what we started working with the vortexes and the geometries. And then this energy moves into the grid system of the planet. And that was explained to us by our guidance. And then The first year we moved in, there were about 6 or 7 lightning strikes on the edge of this mountain. And it got to be a little frightening because we were getting so many lightning strikes, and then we were getting fires after those lightning strikes. And some of them were 40 acres, some 60-acre fires, but they put them out. But our guidance later on told us that this was opening up the mountain to allow the higher dimensional energy to start to flow through. So we just went with it and played with it. And so the land and the way the land's constructed, you can see how energy starts flowing on the land, and it will follow where the water flows. And water starts flowing down certain areas that form creases. And you can start to see how the mountains were the original pyramids that were used by ancients, and they used the way the land was laid out, and they would construct the temples and the labyrinths and the different things that they built in relationship to the land so that it would reinforce the energy that was flowing there.
Hmm. Wow, that's quite a multidimensional series of relationships you just described there from a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And what we did, and I think part of what you were referring to also is, particularly with like our pendants, we have these chambers. We have 2 different chambers that we constructed that are filled with different geometries that we've created, and they're spinning a certain cycle, and we're even putting sound through it, all kinds of things. So it's very interesting that when we put the pendants in after they've been made, and they have all these different, geometries and antenna systems and all kinds of things, and then we put them in the chamber for about 6 hours to be exposed to that resonance and that connection to the earth energies that Gregory was describing. When they come out, those pendants are different. It's like they've settled down. They've matured. I don't know how exactly, what the right word is, but something has shifted in that energy where it's like it's crystallized. It's found its way of continuing to have the quality of resonance that supports these ultimate connections. So those chambers and the connection to the earth energy are a very critical part of the tools that we create.
Yeah, that's super cool. There's just so much intent, not only your own intent, but then it's supported and harmonized with all these other larger embedded energies all being put into it that really makes it unique. It's so much different than I made a pendant and added some cool components to it and then just gave it to you, like you have a whole process of imbuing it with different layers of energy than just your own and personal intent going into it. So that's super cool how all that goes into those. So thanks for describing all that.
And, there are beings on the other dimensional levels and in other aspects of creation that are also putting their energy, their intent, their well-being into it. Because you see, our opportunity as a human being is to grow spiritually, to grow in consciousness, because consciousness and unity is all that there is. So as we are waking up on this planet, and certainly there are so many more awakened individuals than there were when we started working with these tools. And it's wonderful to see people opening up, because that's the reason they're here, to be able to bring through that love. Like you said earlier, it's about bringing the balance between the heaven and the earth together. We are that median point, that dance in between. Raising consciousness is not about leaving and getting out of here. And sometimes people make it feel like, oh, we're suffering through earth just so that we can die and leave, but it's like, this is our opportunity to grow, because this is where there's resistance, and this will build our spiritual muscle by working out all the issues we work through here. And if we can bring through more love, if we can bring through more connection, then we are being of service to everyone. And that's our opportunity. That's what's going to help us grow, so that as our incarnations proceed, we can be moving to a higher and higher level and be of more and more service to all that we meet, because we're in this together to move toward unity. And that's the nature of sacred geometry. It takes us into these realms where everything is working through resonance and connection. So it's like in this image where you have the diameter of the moon in miles is the same as the number of degrees in a cube, and that is the same number as each sign of the zodiac lasts 2,160 years. So it's like universe works with time, works with space, works with measure, and it moves energy through resonance. So the same numbers with different aspects of measurement, like in hertz for frequency, in degrees for angles, for miles. I mean, if you look at in this next slide from the book, all these different platonic solids, you add up the number of degrees on their surface, and for the top three, multiply that by 100, and you get the diameter of the sun. The next four give you the exact diameter of the earth. And the cube we just discussed is the diameter of the moon. So it's like all these coincidences are more than coincidence. It just keeps happening. If it's coincidence, then we should follow what seems to be coincident, because as we shared in the book, there are so many numbers and so many times and so many ways that these things resonate. And that's what it's about. That's how universe moves energy. It moves energy through resonance. And that's, everything that we're taught when we're trying to manifest things in our lives. You've got to get into a good feeling. You've got to open your heart. You've got to bring energy through where you're imagining what you want to create, and you're already feeling it and tasting it. You're not focusing on what you don't have. You're focusing on the creation. And all of this is resonance. You start to vibrate. And when we put aspects of these geometries in our environment and on our body, it shifts our vibration. So it's like with the pendant. I had one grandmother say, what I love about the pendant is that my grandkids used to run away from me when I came. Now when I come and I'm wearing the pendant, they crawl all over me. It's like they're attracted to it. They don't know why, they're just attracted to the energy. Animals are attracted to it. So we started making pendants for children and animals too, because they're attracted to that energy. And it's great because it's not the placebo effect. Your dog just likes to be next to the energy. We've built pyramids where we used to have deer go and sit inside these six-sided pyramids because they liked the energy. And so another fun story was a couple. They were in their late 70s, early 80s. They both bought pendants and then came back a few weeks later to buy something else because they liked the energy. And he leaned over and he said, "What I love about the pendant is my wife doesn't yell at me as much anymore." And she overheard us and said, "I don't have to." And you go, okay, they both took the energy, it both went in the way they needed it to go. And in the end, it improved relationship. It improved energy flowing. We sometimes block the energy between each other with our anger or our frustration or our fear or our sadness. And that's where we say this cuts through all of that.
Oh, awesome. I just, I'm sure you could go on and on and on with the amount of stories you have personally and with the people that you meet and the effects of sacred geometry in people's lives for all the years of experience that you've been doing this.
Mhm.
So it's a real embodied expression through real relationships that you've seen this work out in for many, many years. So thanks for offering those. And you
Yeah.
did mention the book then again, just want to bring it up again, the Sacred Geometry book. All the numbers that you were showing there, this book does a great job. There's so much more in there related to those things that Gregory was just showing. Probably one of the, I've got many books on the subject, but it has some really unique things on relationships that I haven't seen condensed so well or put into one place, with many new things that I hadn't seen other places too. So it was cool to get a lot of new insights and connections there
Mhm.
uh, in my own journey. So thank you for offering those to the world through the book, in addition to all the other beautiful creations that you're making, helping to uplift consciousness and helping people on their journey here. We said we
Thank you,
were going to
George.
go for about an hour, and we're about it probably at that now. So I want to leave it open for any last comments that you'd like to add. It's been certainly a pleasure for me to have you on the channel and discuss sacred geometry and all your work with it. And who knows, we may do something again in the future with some more detailed things if we'd like to. We haven't even touched on the golden ratio, which is a huge part of things I talk about on my channel. So maybe we'll have to have a golden ratio specific conversation specifically
Mhm.
about some of the golden ratio forms, which I love working with. So I don't want you to jump into that now. Maybe we'll table that for a future meeting.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there could be many more we could discuss. But I love the big overview picture of everything that you discussed for Metafroms, specifically about the consciousness expanding and how it's helping people in their lives. So any last kind of comments or closing comments for at least this get together?
Well, one thing while you brought it up, if people go to I connect the number 2 all.com/chapter, they can get a free chapter of the book where we're talking about consciousness. So that will give them a sense of what's going on. And then I think Gail and I will both share. What's fun is that when we are filled with this energy, we don't have to really think about how we're going to be doing our lives. We're just being in our lives. And that's the magic for me that I've discovered with working with sacred geometry. It has allowed me to open myself to these higher realms more and more. It's like the Kundalini was the start of the process. And I was so gifted to be able to bring these tools through so that I could benefit from them myself. And I think that's been one of the more important lessons for me from Spirit is that you are here to be of service to all. However, always pay attention to working on yourself and working with yourself first to bring through that love so you have something to offer. And then there is so much going on in this world where our opportunity to be of service is being called upon for each one of us. So I just put it out there that each one of us to really get into that space of how can I rise to my purpose, my calling, my opportunity in being here, because it's there in every single one of us.
Thanks, Gregory. Gail?
We're in an amazing time right now, and to me, it feels like we're speeding up in this evolutionary pathway that we're on. Having this knowledge and tools and each other to be able to keep centered with all this, keep working with these divine energies is really, really very, very valuable for all of us. And I would just like to thank you, George, for the work that you do, because I think you're offering people some really important entry points into recognizing how this is a very important part of that evolutionary path. And to have the clarity and the intention that we are souls here, bringing this energy of love here to this planet to raise the vibration on this planet. And all the ways that we can do that are perfect. So I just am grateful for you and, you know, all of your people, everything that everyone is doing together, because I really do see that there is an emergence happening that's really wonderful. And I think sacred geometry is a really important part of it all.
Oh, thanks, Gail. Well, it was super awesome to have you both on the channel, and I'm thrilled to have got to have this conversation with you, and looking forward to other opportunities. I don't have much to add. Those beautiful closing comments, and just want to thank all the viewers for watching today, and please post some comments, and please check out the work that Gail and Gregory are doing, and look more into the book and that free chapter at the I Connect to All site. And until next time, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Much love and appreciation. Thank you, Gail and Gregory, for being here with me today. And have a fantastic, love-filled day, everyone. We'll talk to you later. I'll end the recording.